Welcome to MMA True Fan, a biographical podcast series on legendary mixed martial artists. In this episode on Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, hear exclusive interviews with Josh Barnett, Heath Herring, Frank Mir, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, and more. Please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening.
Rodrigo's greatest strength comes from his mind. Rodrigo, it is genius when it comes to how much he can overcome even himself.
If God tells you that's the last day of your life, how would you live? What intensity you live?
He motivates and he really inspires a lot of people in so many different ways. He's transcended from just a fighter to be everything.
MMA True Fan presents Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira by Rich Donahue and Nate Evans.
In Greek mythology, the Minotaur is a gargantuan, mythological beast that had the body of a man and the head of a bull. He resided in the center of a vast labyrinth created by the architect Daedalus and his son, Icarus. He feasted on human flesh.
Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira was born on June 2, 1976, in Vitória de Conquista, a rough middle-class city in Bahia, Brazil. The Nogueira family grew up there, in a rural section. Rodrigo took us back.
When I growing up, I was 4 years old, we moved to the range. When my father has a ranch, so I grew up in the close to the cows and a lot of fruits. My father also has a coffee farm. We have a good life for kids, I have a lot of horses. We have 20 horses. So I've been riding horses. When I was in the bus, I was in the gym.
The Nogueira twins, Rodrigo and Rogerio, only 10 at the time, were playing with friends in front of their uncle's home. There was a party going on, and amidst that chaos, Rodrigo was talking with a friend behind a large truck parked out front. He didn't notice that the truck had started. He tried to move but fell. The truck struck him and ran him over. He couldn't escape. Rogerio was nearby.
When he tried to escape, and he fell down, and the truck started to pass in his leg, and it started to pass in his ribs, and they stomach, and he moved the head, and I gave him the hand. He escaped. After that, I saw him a lot of blood. Terrible experience for me, for the hardest experience in my life to see him that way.
Pain shot through his legs as the truck continued to drive over his shoulder and belly. Before passing out, he remembered he just wanted to talk to his family. He felt like he was going to die.
Rodrigo was in a coma for 4 days. His legs were broken. A broken rib perforated his liver, forcing the removal of part of the organ in one of his ribs. His kidneys and lungs were crushed, and his diaphragm was cracked. He was forced to breathe through machines. Although he was unresponsive to the outside world, he remembered hearing the doctors talk. Nogueira's cousin and black belt under his tutelage, Wald Bloise.
When he was in the hospital, he was in coma. He heard the doctor say, he's dead. And he told me, and he said, no, I'm not dead. I will live. I'm going to live.
He woke from his coma, but was stuck in the hospital. His twin, Rogerio, was always there.
Maybe 11 months in the hospital. He couldn't walk for 6 months. It was terrible.
The doctor thought he'd never walk again. He lived in the hospital for a year and had many surgeries. Part of his back muscles had to be removed, and he had to relearn basic tasks and learn to walk again. But Rodrigo continued to fight. Although the prognosis was grim and the recovery tough, his mother never gave up, as Rogerio explains.
My mother was there, hold his hand for 11 months, move the city, give everything for him. She stayed there with him, my grandmother. They believe 100%. I think it was very important for him.
He defied the odds and was left with a large scar on his back. He built his body back up with swimming. The twins grew up in their mother's gym and were always active. Rodrigo told us.
There's a gym since I was 4 years old. So I grew up, working out very much, doing judo. We did some kung fu, kickboxing, a lot. I was lifting since I was 9 years old.
Rogerio recalls that time.
And every day, me and my brother, we challenge each other, with judo things, kind of MMA things. I remember when I was a kid, my mother gave us boxing gloves from Everlast, And since we was very young, we start do some box. Me and him, we fight like 3 hours every day.
The brothers started training judo at age 4. Years after the accident, Rodrigo still felt pain in his back and could not return to competitive sports. Finally, at age 14, he returned to training judo. His family moved from Conquista to Salvador. To make up for lost time, Rodrigo started training in more sports along with his brother. Rogerio shares.
We had a gym in front of our house, and that gym, they start to do jiu-jitsu. And we started judo, but we like a lot to watch some jiu-jitsu things from Rio de Janeiro.
Rodrigo continues.
Almost a teenager, I started to do boxing. I love boxing. I trained with Luis Dória, the Olympic coach, Brazil, for many years. I was beautiful because I was the biggest fan of this guy. I always watched this guy on TV, and then he became my coach.
Through a translator, Luis said, "My first impression was that he was going to be a big fighter. Strong, disciplined, determined, with an attitude of a champion. Rodrigo has always been skillful, and assimilates the techniques very easy. His evolution happened very fast. When I realized he had great potential, I invited him to be part of my project, Life Champions, at the Champion Gym in the Villanova neighborhood in Salvador. His evolution was very fast because there, we only trained athletes with high potential."
His cousin named him Minotauro, or Minotaur. It sounded fearsome, but really, it was intended as a joke, due to his size and strength. Mr. Doria continues, Rodrigo has a lot of strong points, but his determination and resistance is beyond normal. He is a super athlete. I already trained more than 7,000 youths, and I tell you that Rodrigo is incredible. His heart and love is in what he does. It is very important. At age 16, he found the sport that would define him, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He first trained with Guilherme Assad, who came from the Ricardo De La Riva Academy. De La Riva was a national star, representing the famed Carlson Gracie Academy.
Yeah, De La Riva was a famous guy in Brazil. He defeated 3 Gracies, in the year. So he was very technical. He was skinny dude, and he used to do a lot of omoplatas.
Carlson Gracie's approach to jiu-jitsu focused on combat-ready skills. The team was known for their powerful guard passers. In order to compete, the skinny and weaker De La Riva developed a revolutionary guard style known as Guarda Pudim, or pudding guard. After he used the technique to defeat the at the time unbeaten Royce Gracie at the 1986 Copa Cantao, it became known as the De La Riva guard.
I remember he was a blue belt, tough, tall, 2 tough, tall twin kids.
Ricardo Liborio.
They came to visit Rio. I think it was a competition that they came to actually, and they stayed at my house. And I remember, as it was today, those kids are tall and tough, and you really could see it that there was something special on both of them.
Soon, Rodrigo would regularly travel to Rio de Janeiro to train with De La Riva.
And he trained with me when I started. It made me feel like I wasn't even like a human. Like he made me tap a couple times. He made me show the real jiu-jitsu with no strength at all. Things were different. So I started to follow this guy. I used to come to Rio, spend 3-4 months a year. We got 3 trains a day with him. He got a big motivation through this guy. Got my black belt with him. He taught me how to play in the guard. He taught me how to play even the big guys from the top. This thing I used to do in MMA. Playing the guard, the half guard. Things like this. He was the guy who taught me this thing.
He competed in grappling tournaments, becoming a Brazilian national champion in the blue belt category. In 1997, as a purple belt, he took silver at the Worlds and bronze at the Brazilian Nationals. Rodrigo looked back at this time.
We started to go for train 3 times a week, things like these. I won tournaments. I got my first belt, and I won the Brazilian tournament, absolute class, Then, all the weight divisions. Then went to my purple belt. I won second place in the Worlds. I won the Brazilian tournament, and then went to brown. Every year I got a new belt. I became a black belt in less than 4 years. But I'll tell you, my jiu-jitsu come for this guy, Everything I made it, was watching this guy.
1999 was a pivotal year for Nogueira. He finished his competitive jiu-jitsu career. First, as a brown belt, he became a Pan-American champion at weight and absolute. He was awarded his black belt, an unprecedented achievement having only trained for 4.5 years. Then, as a black belt, he won bronze at the Worlds. Nogueira was a champion, a master at his craft. However, adult life crept in. His daughter was born the year prior, and he needed some money. The Royce Gracie Academy featured a dominant jiu-jitsu team, but they also trained and competed in MMA. Rodrigo watched early UFCs and loved seeing Royce Gracie apply his beautiful technique to win the tournaments. He loved the sport and he knew, if given a chance, his style could dominate too.
Gracie family, I saw the documentaries about, Rickson Gracie, the Gracies went to USA and was playing the ground with different teams fighting against the wrestlers. The people used to say that had this video in the VHS, that like videotapes, and I was to watch. But, when I saw my first UFC, I said, man, I got to do this thing.
He also knew Rogerio could be successful.
And he said, no, man, you have a big talent with MMA. Let's do this. So I move everything. So I am very, how can I say, blessed now to have Rodrigo on my side now. He helped me a lot, especially when they start to fight.
Rodrigo made his MMA debut at World Extreme Fighting 6 on June 12, 1999. He submitted David Dodd with a Kimura in the first round for $150. He was promised $1,000, but the promoter couldn't afford to give it to him. However, in Miami, where he lived, a karate teacher promised him a place to teach jiu-jitsu should he win. It was more of a job interview than an MMA bout. Mario Sperry trained at Royce Gracie Academy with Rodrigo and always respected his skills. On one fateful day,
but once I was doing a seminar in U.S. and he just showed up and he asked me if he could join the seminar. I said, yeah, no problem. So he came in. So I saw a lot of talent on the guy, and I said, hey, what are you doing here in America? I have a gym here. I teach. I have 20, 30 students or something. I said, hey, what are you doing, man? We should train. So why don't you go to Brazil and we are setting up a group of guys. So we just opened up a Brazilian top team. Brazilian top team was not even Brazilian top team. So one day the guy just came in Rio and started training with us.
In the fall of '99, he competed 3 more times, submitting Nate Schroeder at WEF 7, and then beating Valentin Overeem and Yuri Cochrane at the Rings King of Kings 1999 Block A.
Fighting Network Rings was a Japanese MMA promotion, more similar to Pancrase than UFC. They had more of a traditional, hybrid fighting wrestling style. Closed fist strikes were not permitted to the head. The King of Kings tournament was a major event featuring 32 fighters.
Around this time, things were brewing in Nogueira's dojo back in Brazil. Royce Gracie had moved to America. In order to keep training with their master, he forced his students to travel from Brazil at their own expense. This, along with the commission the academy was taking from their fighters' purses, put the team at a crossroads. Mario Sperry and Merlo Bustamante got the idea that they could have coaches in Rio help them with their kickboxing and wrestling, leaving the jiu-jitsu to themselves. Carlson wanted to supervise all the training, and disapproved. They had to break away. Sperry and Bustamante, along with fellow Carlson Gracie team standouts Ricardo Liborio and Babio Duarte, founded what would become one of the cornerstones of mixed martial arts. Brazilian top team. Rodrigo knew this was the place for him, as Ricardo Liborio explains.
When actually Rodrigo decides to move from the United States back to Brazil and train to pursue a career as an MMA fighter, he called me. He was living in the United States. He has his debut here in the U.S., but he called me through actually another De La Riva black belt, was Gavião. And at the time, we were building up Brazilian top team. And the word spread out that we have this very good team of MMA fighters.
Antonio began the new millennium winning his first belt, defeating Jeremy Horn by unanimous decision for the WEF Super Fight Championship.
He was an outstanding athlete.
Mario Sperry.
He had a lot of endurance, a lot of heart, and he had some boxing skills already, and of course the jiu-jitsu was very, very, how can I say, he was very offensive in without the gi, and he was not scared to get punched like the other jiu-jitsu fighters.
At the Rings King of Kings 1999 final in February, he defeated Sambo champion Andrei Kopylov via split decision. In his next fight, he was eliminated by Dan Henderson via split decision. It was a close fight, and Nogueira thought he did enough to win by controlling most of the action. Nevertheless, it was his first loss in MMA competition. In the summer, Rodrigo returned to Japan to fight Tsuyoshi Kosaka to a draw at Ring's Millennium Combine 3. He had already fought 4 times that year, but he was not done. In October of 2000, Ring staged another King of Kings tournament and invited Nogueira back. Traveling to Japan from Brazil was a taxing ordeal, and BTT traveled there often. Being prepared and getting used to the travel is critical, as Mario Sperry explains.
Was tough because we had to learn, right? It's like
Right.
when you don't know how to swim and they just throw you on the water. So
Right.
We had some hard times in the beginning, but right away we learned how to do it. I realized that we could not stop. If we stopped, because the jet lag was 11, 12 hours, depending of the summer or winter. We were used to get there like 6 o'clock in the afternoon, was 6 o'clock in the morning in Brazil. So we could not even let, the guy kind of bend a little bit and lay a little bit on the bus, because you would sleep. And if you sleep, you would lose everything.
Right.
You would lose the timing of getting back. Get used to the timing. So what I realized that it was tough. So we couldn't let nobody sleep. And as soon as we get in the hotel, we leave our bags. That was the order. We leave the bags on the floor. We pick up our fighting gear, and we would go training. And we would train for 1 hour, 1 hour and a half. Then we would go have dinner, and then we would go back into the hotel and sleep. Doing that, we would have nobody could survive that. So when we get to the hotel, we would take a good sleep, and then the next day would be a little bit easier.
King of Kings 2000 featured another fantastic bracket of fighters. Returning fighters such as Bob Ballou, Dave Monet, Jeremy Horn, and Valentin Overeem were joined by the likes of Randy Couture, who had vacated his UFC championship years prior, and a young Sambo expert who was 3-0 at the time, Fedor Emelianenko. Antonio was slotted into the Block A show and defeated Akhmed Lapensov and Kiyoshi Tamura to qualify for the final. Nogueira's first opponent at the King of Kings 2000 final was Volk Hahn. Volk was another Sambo champion and trained with his previous opponent, Andrei Kopylov and Fedor Emelianenko. He was twice Antonio's age, but proved tough to submit. Ultimately, Nogueira won by unanimous decision. Things got much easier after that. He submitted Hiromitsu Kanehara 20 seconds into the second, setting up a final match with Valentin Overeem. It was a rematch of the 99 Block A bout. Valentin was on a roll, beating both Yamamoto and Couture in less than a minute. Minotauro destroyed him. Within the first minute of the bout, he tapped Overeem with an arm triangle choke, becoming the champion.
The labyrinth started to form around the Minotaur. He was a black belt, a jiu-jitsu champion, and within 3 years of MMA, won 2 belts. His victory at Rings got him noticed in Japan, but the promotion folded. BTT negotiated a contract for him to join the biggest MMA promotion at the time, the Pride Fighting Championships. It was another wrinkle BTT had to get used to.
Pride is a huge organization. We better, do our homework in rings. It's a small organization. You cannot punch on the floor. You're going to get used to the jet lag. You're going to get used to the fights. You're going to get used to the food. You're going to get used to the interviews. All the different things that the fighters they're not used to.
Minotauro made his debut at Pride 15 on July 29, 2001. His opponent was Gary Big Daddy Goodrich, a towering powerhouse who made a name for himself in the UFC before Pride. Gary fought in the first ever Pride event, and his opponent had to be taken out of the ring on a stretcher.
The bell sounded, and Nogueira opened up with a few leg kicks and shot in for a takedown. Gary was training with world-class wrestlers Mark Coleman and Tom Erickson, and sprawled nicely to negate it. He shot again, this time swiveling his hips to pull Gary into his guard. Minotauro went to work, sweeping Gary and getting on top. Goodrich tried to scramble to his feet, but he had to defend Rodrigo's guillotine attempt, which he chained to a shoulder lock, to finally lock in a triangle choke. Gary tapped on Nogueira's face, and he let go of the hold. For a moment, he laid there and screamed to the heavens.
I saw the appreciation the Japanese people has from the submission, from the jiu-jitsu. And I was so proud to be a jiu-jitsu player over there, That's what motivated me to train and to show them.
For Rodrigo, this was an example of how martial arts can be influenced by multiple countries, and it became full circle.
The culture of Japan, the jiu-jitsu came from Japan, and they call this a judo of Okinawa, was kind of, the ground part of judo that's more often people used to do in Okinawa. In the Second World, when the Occidental people came to Japan, after the Second World, and things like this, the people stopped a little bit to do jiu-jitsu. Okay, and the Conde Koma, the guy who brought the jiu-jitsu to Brazil, he came to Brazil and he taught some family. Okay, it was a Gracie family in Belém do Pará, in the north of Brazil. There was neighborhood. They used to live in close to his house. And then in the 90s, some people came back to Japan, bringing back the culture of Japan, martial art, like a jiu-jitsu, like the Gracie and us, we brought back, So I think that's why the appreciation for the Japanese, we brought the gi. We used to use gis, we used to bound people like martial artists, not like athlete,
No one has seen jiu-jitsu like this before in MMA. At this point, jiu-jitsu had already established itself as a dominant style. It was very effective, but also passive. It was a gentle art, played defensively and patiently. Minotauro attacked. It was a strategy he developed with Mario Sperry, a Brazilian top team.
His game was pretty simple. We always train with endurance and the ability to keep going, fighting with his back on the ground. And of course, we had maybe 5 or 6 positions that we used to train 1 million times. So the half guard strip, the triangle, and the omoplata. There were things if you think they're kind of an engine, they work together. If something doesn't work here, the guy defends, we're going to do another one, so one brings the other. So that's what I try to do, to make him work, moving.
He chained submission attempts like a boxer throws punches. He threatened from everywhere, constantly moving. If the first move doesn't finish you, it sets up the next, and then another. This was a 6'3" heavyweight that moved better than most lightweights on the circuit.
Minotauro looked very impressive in his debut, and it didn't take him long to enter deep waters. His next opponent was none other than Mark the Hammer Coleman. Mark, a former UFC champion and Olympian, had a 6-fight win streak in Pride. In the process, he won the prestigious Pride Grand Prix 2000, featuring a style he invented, ground and pound. Mark used his superior wrestling and power to take opponents to the mat, not to submit, but attack with strikes. The brutal style was seen as a deterrent to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The wrestler didn't mind being on top, in a Jiu-Jitsu player's guard. In turn, the Jiu-Jitsu artists used the guard in a more defensive style. The prevailing strategy was to be patient and counter.
Minotauro was different. First of all, he was confident in his boxing. Mario Sperry explains.
So his game was pretty simple. And a lot of people couldn't see that, but I saw it right away at the beginning. He had some skills with his hands, and he could fight with his back on the floor.
He'd been training boxing and kickboxing since he recovered from his accident. He honed those techniques with his brother and Luis Doria. When the bout began, Rodrigo punched his way into the clinch and worked some dirty boxing. When they broke, Nogueira threw crisp combinations to Mark's jaw. Since he had no issue being on the ground, he threw his techniques with full power.
He had some decent boxing, but he was not worried about to be taken down. You see? So he was not worried about it. So he would throw his hand with no fear. If you don't want to take me down, that's no problem. So I will punch you in the face. If you take me down, I won't hold up my punches because you're going to take me down.
No better example of that than at the midpoint of the round, when Nogueira torqued up a huge head kick. He missed and ended up slipping. Mark quickly followed him to the ground.
What did he do? He took Nogueira down. So when he thought that the fight would be over, not over, but would be a good scenario for him to be on top, punching his opponent, his nightmare began.
Minotauro didn't sit and wait like his predecessors. Ricardo Liborio said,
I trained him for that fight particularly. There is a position that we're doing it, when you have grips that you hold the wrist. Imagine you hold the wrist and you have your 4 fingers outside and your thumb inside of the wrist. This grip is excellent for you to pull, or to push back, or to open up. Or you open up to pull your leg, you go to triangle, or you push back to get a Kimura. When you switch that grip to the 4 fingers inside and your thumb outside, it's excellent for you to push and pull the arm towards you.
He locked Mark's wrist and began to attack. He threw legs above Mark's shoulders, wrenched his head back and forth, and fished for openings. Soon enough he found one and locked in a triangle choke. Mark tried to slip out, but Rodrigo transitioned into an armbar, finishing the match. He hung off Mark's hulking frame, nearly inverted. Mark had a tap on the referee's face.
Beating the Grand Prix champion made the MMA community take notice. Pride Fighting Championships did as well, and set up their inaugural heavyweight championship fight between their 2 rising stars, Rodrigo Nogueira and Heath Herring, at Pride 17.
Heath, the Texas Crazy Horse Herring, was making waves in Pride, defeating the likes of Tom Erickson, Anson Inoue, and Mark Kerr. He dressed like an outlaw from your favorite Western, with a black leather duster and hat. Under the hat, he sported hair crazier than an anime hero. He was a Street Fighter II character brought to life. Heath reflected on the night.
One of the things I've always just really appreciated about Mr. Saki Kabara and the whole crew of Pride, they really treated me well. I hope they treated Antonio and his family well. I know they brought my family over there for the fight, and I think they brought his family, and it was a big deal. It was it was in Tokyo Dome. That was the first time I'd ever been in Tokyo Dome. So I mean, that thing was it still is. It's monstrous. The back tier. I was like, man, who would even pay a ticket to sit up there? It looked like a jet could turn around inside the place.
Herring was born in the U.S., but hailed from the Dutch kickboxing team Golden Glory. On the surface, you might want to call this striker versus grappler, but both men were extremely well-rounded.
He was good on the ground, good enough. Was a striker, so he strikes good. Hard kick, he have Dutch trained with the Dutch guys, hard kick. He beat Mark, back then, was a big name.
For Rodrigo, it was a chance to demonstrate another aspect of his game.
I know I could fight and stand up too, so that was a chance, and I was thinking okay, if you want to fight standing up, we're gonna fight standing up, gonna stand up with him, and that was a chance to show people I wasn't just a ground fighter,
On top of that, both men were in great shape. It was a combustible mix, with a fuse lit by an unrelenting pace. The match exploded into one of the greatest heavyweight bouts in Pride's history.
I was young. Yeah. We were both young. So it's just young and hungry and excited, and then a big venue, and I don't know. I think it was. I don't even remember that exhaustion was a part of it.
After 20 minutes of action, Rodrigo was declared the winner by unanimous decision. He was the Pride heavyweight champion, his 3rd belt. Heath put it into perspective.
The whole experience was overwhelming, so I can imagine that for him it was very similar. I think, just like I said, coming in, you're young and you're just in front of all these people and in foreign country, and it's just big hype. I mean, we come off the plane and there'd be reporters there, in your face, taking pictures, and there are people just always waiting down in the hotel lobby. You couldn't barely, leave to go eat or anything without getting mobbed. So it was definitely, I just think all the way around, it was kind of overwhelming. And then once you got in there, it was all this pent-up kind of nerves and just, everything kind of coming out on both sides.
After submitting Enson Inoue and earning his first knockout win of his career against Sane Kikuta, Minotauro faced one of the biggest tests of his career. The beast, Bob Sapp, splashed onto the mixed martial arts scene. He was a mountain of a man, 6'5", 350 pounds of pure muscle. Ripped from a Rob Liefeld X-Force cover. The former NFL lineman didn't have much experience, but he was already 2-0 in Pride and 1-1 in K1.
It was a huge fight, but Nogueira just fought Kikuta, and now they want him to take on a human kaiju in 15 days. Wald Bloise told us how the negotiations went.
He said that usually the Japanese are hard to negotiate. He's always like, give me that, and he never accepted the price that he wanted to, so he ended up always fighting for less. He said the only fight that the guys never say anything was like when he say, we want you to fight the guy, and he say, no, the guy's too big, 400 pounds, like, I really don't want to fight, I just fought, so, and the guys, come on, I want you to fight, and instead of say no, he say, give me twice as much as you give me, and they didn't contest. They say, okay, done. So that was the only fight that he said that he wasn't hard to negotiate, like wasn't hard. And then he say, oh man, I should have asked for more.
Sapp was a great unknown, and his potential seemed limitless at the time. He spent some time at AMC Pancration to prepare for the bout. Josh Barnett was one of his trainers and cornermen.
I said, Nogueira is a great fight for you. And he's just like, what are you freaking talking about? That sounds moronic. He's Nogueira. He's this, he's that. He's beat all these guys. And I go, I know. But his game will not work on you. Not very well. Like he will not triangle you. He will not be able to armbar you off his back. It just won't work that way. You're too big.
The night before their bout, Nogueira knocked on Mario Sperry's door.
I was really nervous because Bob Sapp was a big guy. And he went to my room. He was kind of nervous. He went to my room and, hey, Mario, hey, what are you doing, man? You have a fight tomorrow. You should rest. Yeah, I came here. I want to talk to you and, relax a little bit. Okay, no problem. So when I looked, the guy was sleeping on the floor, man. He just slept on the floor. And I slept in the middle of the night and woke him up. Hey, man, go to your bed, man. He relaxed. He was so relaxed that he slept on the floor.
On August 28, 2002, K1 and Pride Fighting Championships co-promoted Dynamite. It combined stars from both promotions into a huge show. It was held at Tokyo National Stadium with a paid attendance of over 91,000.
It's more than that. I think 91,000 paid. I think it was 100-something thousand that were there. I think 91,000 people paid. Man, I remember seeing people, little heads down up there in the dome, babies crying on a crowd. It was incredible.
Antonio, the defending Pride Heavyweight Champion, faced the Beast in a match biblical in scale. Pro wrestling superstar Bill Goldberg joined Bas Rutten and Mauro Ranallo ringside as a guest commentator.
First and foremost, it was an honor to be there. The landscape of mixed martial arts back in that day was, it was as cream of the crop as you could get. The UFC didn't have its stranglehold on the fighters at that point, and Pride had some events that were going on that were just so spectacular. Bob was a friend of mine. Bob is a friend of mine. Number of guys that were friends of mine at that time over there, Coleman and Fry and Randleman and Josh Barnett, and the list goes on and on. It was truly, for a guy like me, even though I was quote unquote towards the top of my career, to be in the presence of all those guys, man, they were all heroes of mine. My wrestling character evolved from them. Yeah, and then for Bob to get the opportunity to fight Nogueira, Bob was a different entity all in of himself. The size of that guy at that point and the strength was immeasurable.
In order to prepare for the match, Brazilian top team had their work cut out for them, as Ricardo Liborio explains.
It's hard to prepare guys to fight Bob Sapp, right? You don't have partners. You're not gonna You got to combine two guys and take them around with a duct tape or something like this. Two 250-pound guys. But it's impossible to prepare somebody to train with Bob Sapp.
Mario Sperry continues.
The training was really good. I really thought I was impressed with Bob Sapp because I really thought that he was going to get tired in the first round, and he didn't. He was really prepared for the fight.
The plan was simple. Nogueira would stay on the move and outbox Sapp. Being outweighed by 127 pounds, grappling seemed out of the question, especially early on.
Don't try to take this guy down. He's too heavy. You have to work a little bit around, move around a little bit, make him move, use your jab because your jab is good. Yeah, no problem, Mario. So the first thing the guy does, he shoots for a double leg.
It nearly cost him. Sapp lifted Nogueira with ease, pile driving him to the mat head first. Bas Rutten, Stephen Quadros, and Bill Goldberg were ringside, calling the action. As Bob hoisted Nogueira into the air like a child, they screamed.
That was the power bomb. Nobody was counting that he was going to pick up Rodrigo and is smashing on his head. In reality, I did not realize that he was out, He passed out. He passed out in the beginning. Rodrigo went out.
It was close to ending already. Bob had little in technique, but he made up for it with his titanic power. Josh Barnett explained this was all part of the game plan.
In Japan, we worked on a few things. One of them was the powerbomb, because I knew Nogueira was going to shoot in on him. And I'm like, well, you're big enough, Bob. You're strong enough. And you were pro wrestling. So, here's how we're going to work this. So I'd take heavy bags and put them on the floor and have Bob snatch them up like he had a guy around the waist and tuck the bag to the floor. In addition to working on not even so much his skill work with his hands, but just being able to throw nonstop and just keep going.
The fight continued. Nogueira would attempt triangles, an armbar, even a leg lock. Bob powered out of all of it, slamming Nogueira out of each attempt. In between, he rained down jackhammer-like strikes while on Nogueira's guard. Boss was hoarse, screaming his reactions. As the round continued, Minotauro weathered the storm, continued to attack, and Sapp started to fatigue.
Nogueira continued to keep going. I just thought, at any moment now, one of these hammer fists is going to turn Nogueira's lights out, but that we needed to get with it because this 10-minute round is going to be a hell of a toll on Bob. And I just remember in the corner, in between rounds, that Bob was exhausted and he was not looking as determined as how we started.
To the surprise of everyone, the fight went to a second round. The champion was losing. Sapp had a cut above his eye, but Nogueira's face was battered.
No, and then on the first break, I said, man, I was talking to him, and I saw that he was looking something behind me. He was like avoiding my eyes, and he was trying to look, around my head. I said, hey, what are you doing, man? I was explaining, the structure, and he was looking at the big screen. He was looking himself at the big screen. He got a cut a little below his eye. He said to me, hey, Mario, do you think this cut's gonna look bad after the fight? I said, come on, man. You are too ugly. Don't need to worry about that. Come on, focus on the fight.
The next round began, and Nogueira started to work the game plan again. Move and box. Sapp was breathing very heavy. Nogueira shot in for a takedown and pulled guard. They continued to scramble, and Nogueira continued to attack.
Nogueira cheated death as a boy. A truck couldn't kill him. How could another man?
Man, he would never quit. He would die trying to win.
This was a battle of wills, a battle of heart. No one had a body like Bob Sapp, but no one on earth had a heart like Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. Finally, Nogueira used a triangle attempt to sweep Bob, landing him in the mount. He pivoted to an armbar. Sapp tapped. Minotauro had slayed the beast. Stephen Quadros was beside himself, screaming, "This was outrageous! This was a miracle!" Josh Barnett reflected on the fight.
That's what makes Nogueira Nogueira, man. He is one of the most durable guys ever. Kudos should be given to Brazilian top team for their training at the time and having weapons like that in a guy's arsenal.
After the bout, Goldberg returned to his locker room with Sapp.
We were walking back to the locker room. I was with Bob and his guys. Nogueira was in the locker room. He was sitting down in his locker. And Bob and everybody walks by, and he looks at me, and he stops me, and he goes, "Your friend, he tried to kill me." And I looked at him like, well, kind of isn't that the point?
Rodrigo took a couple of months off. He climbed back into the ring with another giant, Semmy Schilt, in November. To make matters worse, he was very sick.
He got like 105 temperature, man. He was sick. He was really bad. I said, man, you're not gonna fight. No, I'm gonna fight Mario.
Despite that, he submitted the 7-foot kickboxer with an armbar in 6 minutes. Nogueira never had an off switch. When he should be resting, he kept training. Sperry never had to push him to train. He was struggling to hold him back for his own good.
He was used to train, hiding from me sometimes. I had to call him, "Wait, what are you doing?" No, I'm here at home. Come on, you're at home. Don't lie to me. So he was training. He was running. He was the guy. He was the kind of a fighter that he would just relax if he trained more.
He wasn't in bed trying to recover. He was sneaking in training sessions. Of course, he was still sick only a month later at Pride 24. There, he defeated the only man to defeat him up until that point, Dan Henderson.
Dan had eliminated Rodrigo from the Ring's King of Kings 99 tournament and went on to win. He fought for Team Quest, a legendary stable of fighters which included Randy Couture and Matt Lindland. He not only was a world-class wrestler, but had serious power in his right hand. It was a very competitive fight, but in the end Rodrigo finished him with an armbar in the third.
With that, Rodrigo cemented his place as the top heavyweight in the world. He was the Pride heavyweight champion, riding a 13-fight win streak. He defeated UFC champions, kickboxing champions, sambo champions. He slayed beasts and chopped down skyscrapers. He seemed unstoppable.
Fedor Emelianenko joined Pride after rings folded. Both men were in each other's orbit since they started MMA competition. Fedor was part of Russian top team, training with sambo masters Andrei Kopelev and Volk Khan. Both of these men were defeated by Rodrigo during his rings tenure. Fedor suffered his first loss to Tsuyoshi Kosaka during the King of Kings 2000 tournament. After that, he began a campaign that put him on a collision course with Minotauro. First, he won both the rings openweight and absolute class tournaments. Once he got to Pride, he defeated Semmy Schilt and Heath Herring, which made the MMA community take notice. The matchup was set. Russian top team versus Brazilian top team. Nogueira already defeated his coaches. What could the student do? He looked impressive against Herring, but Nogueira made it a habit of defeating ground and pound specialists. His jiu-jitsu was too strong. Many in the world thought Nogueira's guard was the most dangerous in the sport. Like so many Athenians in Greek mythology, no one entered the Minotauro's labyrinth and survived.
The match took place on March 16, 2003, at Pride 25 in the Yokohama Arena. Honor and pageantry were the signatures of Pride Fighting Championships. The 20,000 fans in attendance stood for the Russian and Brazilian national anthems. Nobuhito Takada, a founding father of Pride, stood in the middle of the ring with a contract. He announced formally, like a samurai duel, that the Pride Heavyweight Championship was on the line. He took the belt from Nogueira, held it aloft, and presented it to the crowd. The bell sounded, and they sprang into action. Nogueira went for a takedown, and Fedor defended. The Russian leapt in with the right hand, cracking Nogueira on the chin. Nogueira wanted to play the guard game, as usual, and soon enough they were there. Fedor had no issue. He didn't try to pass. His strikes were calculated, accurate, and unbelievably powerful. Every successful hit echoed over the white canvas and out into the silent and respectful Japanese audience. Stephen Quadros, calling the action ringside, stated, "It sounds like a buffalo getting hit with a baseball bat."
Many other fighters would not have survived such an onslaught, but Minotauro's will was second to none. He continued to play the guard game, blocking punches with his feet to set up triangle chokes. He fished for a kimura. All the while, the Russian curled and sprung into huge punch combinations. As the first round came to a close, Nogueira swept Fedor, only to be reversed back as the bell rang. Mario Sperry, and the rest of Nogueira's corner, was surprised. Fedor didn't have a body like Bob Sapp or Mark Coleman, but he hit even harder. On top of that, he was very fast.
The problem with Fedor that he was really fast and strong, and he came from sambo, so he had the game to avoid Nogueira's jiu-jitsu. So the first fight we were surprised.
The second round was much of the same. Nogueira pulled guard and continued to attack. The educated Japanese crowd audibly exhaled with every submission attempt, but the stoic sambo expert kept escaping, and punished the Brazilian with more earth-shattering strikes. Just like the end of the first, Nogueira exploded and swept Fedor, only to have the bell sound.
Rodrigo knew he had to get something going in the third round. He was losing, but time and again he showed he was never out of a fight. Once again, Fedor found himself in Nogueira's guard, and he continued to punch. He was a bit slowed, but everyone could hear that his power was still there. Nogueira swept and went for a leg lock, only to be countered and kicked in the face. Fedor leapt on top of Nogueira again. He was making a statement. The bout concluded, and Fedor offered his hand to Rodrigo to pick him up. They embraced briefly. True sportsmen.
Theseus defeated the Minotaur. Fedor Emelianenko became the Pride heavyweight champion. Nogueira looks back at this bout as his biggest regret. For an article on GracieMag.com, he said, "I had too much heart and not enough maturity. My regret in my career was having taken this bout with Fedor. I was really injured, with a seriously herniated disc. It's stupid not to respect your body's limitations."
Rodrigo returned to the winner's circle later that year, defeating former UFC heavyweight champion Rico Rodriguez by decision. At the same time, Fedor was in the middle of contract negotiations with Pride. After he knocked out Gary Goodrich at Pride Total Elimination 2003, he defeated Yuji Nagata for the rival Inoki Bumbaye organization.
For this reason, along with some injuries Fedor was dealing with, Pride set up an interim heavyweight championship bout between the number 1 and number 2 contenders in the division, Rodrigo Nogueira and Mirko Filipovic. Mirko is known affectionately as Mirko CroCop, due to his time serving in the Croatian Special Forces anti-terrorist unit. He was a standout kickboxer. Fighting for the K1 organization, he was runner-up twice in both the 1999 and 2000 Grand Prix tournaments. Citing issues with pay, Mirko decided to transition to MMA, with devastating effect. He was undefeated at 7-0-2 with 6 KOs. CroCop uses powerful striking and movement to keep the fight in standing position. You could also see he was developing his defensive wrestling game in order to keep the league's grapplers from taking him down. Mirko's most dangerous weapon was his left high kick, which damaged fighters regardless if they blocked it or not.
The bout took place on November 9, 2003, at Pride Final Conflict. That event was the Final Four of Pride's middleweight tournament, which would be considered light heavyweight by today's standards. 67,450 people packed the Tokyo Dome. Rodrigo had a lot of pressure on him from home, too. Wald Bloise told us why.
He was under a lot of pressure because the whole Brazil supposedly he's going to show every Sunday night. We have a program in Brazil called Fantastic. And it talks about what happened a week and this and that. And that program went there with a reporter and to tape how good Rodrigo is and how well known he was in Japan, and that fight that he fought was a CroCop fight, and he really had to win because it was under a lot of pressure. Imagine your whole country go to watching how great you were, and if you don't make it, imagine.
Nogueira liked to shoot for a takedown and then pull guard. Early in the fight, he did just that, and had Mirko in his closed guard for the first 4 minutes. Rodrigo was working, but couldn't attempt a solid submission. Mirko survived and escaped, and refused to go to the ground again. He circled Nogueira, landing left kicks to his liver and head. The left high kick was dangerous by itself, but what really made it deadly was how CroCop threw it. The left kick can also strike the opponent's liver, and since Mirko threw both strikes the same way, he left opponents playing Russian roulette. To change pace, Mirko also had a fantastic left straight, which he used to set up the kicks. Nogueira was being picked apart. He attempted takedowns, but was quickly shucked off.
And he was very fast concerning takedown defense.
Mario Sperry.
Nogueira is such an outstanding fighter that we've been training a lot single legs, because in my perspective, CroCop was used to defend better the double legs. And Nogueira, he got confused on the first round. He got some punches. He got beat up a little bit, and he didn't do anything that we were supposed to do. I mean, he tried, but he couldn't do it anyways.
Nogueira rolled to guard after each attempt, but Mirko wouldn't follow. He walked away and motioned for him to stand back up. At the close of the round, Mirko landed a flush left high kick, dropping Nogueira.
Rodrigo told Wald Bloise exactly how it felt getting hit with one of those world-famous kicks.
Towards the end of the fight, when he got the kick in the head and he got knocked out at the very last seconds in the round, he said when he sit down, he didn't feel the half of his body from the kick. He said, I thought it was being hit with a baseball bat.
Oh, but it's 100% he was losing it, and he knew it.
Ricardo Liborio.
And you can't, in a corner, you can't deny that. You got to go there. You got to do it. And you can't tell me, okay, you're doing great. No, you're not doing great. You're losing it. You got to do something about it if you want to win this fight.
Nogueira had to do something, and quickly.
Go over there. You still can win. You guys down and you submit him.
Mario Sperry tried to get Nogueira to focus on the game plan.
I said, listen, man, go to the single leg. Go to the single leg on the break, right? And he went to the double leg again.
Instead of swiveling it to guard, he continued to move forward, finishing the shot. Mounted on top of CroCop, the crowd started to go crazy. At first, Mirko didn't do much. Boss Rutan suspected that he was trying to stall the match into a restart standing. Nogueira delivered some ground and pound, and Mirko had enough. He tried to buck Nogueira off of him, but that's exactly what Minotauro wanted. He caught Mirko's arm and locked it in belly down. Mirko tapped. It was yet another upset, another comeback win. Nogueira's spirit could never be broken. He was champion again.
Pulling deep from his soul that win, and his heart. That was a showcase of the heart, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was really the human soul soaring. That people pay that ticket to see a human being overcome situations like that.
Sitting ringside was Fedor. He mustered a rare smile for the camera. They had unfinished business.
Fedor vs. Minotauro 2 was a match that could be promoted and stand alone as a pay-per-view draw. It would have been one of the biggest fights in the world. It simply was not enough for Pride Fighting Championships. Instead of setting up a rematch, each man would be part of Pride's first heavyweight Grand Prix. Minotauro and Fedor were placed in a stacked bracket. Rodrigo fought often, and he knew as he continued to rack up wins, His next opponent could study more and more about him. He had to adapt creatively as his career moved on. He needed to be able to surprise his opponents with new techniques. The minds of the Brazilian top team put together a masterful game plan, as Mario Sperry explains.
Strength-wise, we could not beat him because he was too strong. So I said, you know what, we're going to try to at least, and he was very fast as well, so we're going to try at least try to match the speed. So we lost a lot of weight, and we became really, really strong, and really fast on the ground. So Nogueira was training for 20 minutes non-stop in a full attacking mode all the time, and we built this conditioning during the 6 months or 5 months of training.
Speed combined with limitless cardiovascular strength. They knew he had to be in top shape, especially in the semifinals. To get a shot at Fedor, he would have to beat another man first. He would drag these giants into the ocean and watch them drown. Nogueira had something else up his sleeve. It came from the jungle. His first opponent was Hirotaka Yokoi. He was game, and it was a competitive fight in the first round. In the second, he was fatigued and shot lazily. Nogueira sprawled. Instead of kneeing, he locked in a modified front choke. Boss Rutten, a submission specialist, had never seen the move before and dubbed it a Brazilian top team special. The twisting, constricting nature of the choke was dubbed the anaconda. Although many credit Rodrigo with creating the move, another gentleman was responsible, according to Mario Sperry.
The guy who showed me this choke was Milton Vieira. He's the guy who showed me the first anaconda choke. As far as I know, he was the one who developed that.
The next round was with Heath Herring, a rematch of the inaugural heavyweight championship bout. Heath describes the scene.
I remember we were fighting. We fought somewhere. I remember it was really hot and humid, and we were just super. Everybody was just slick. It was a really weird. The humidity was really bad. I still remember that day.
Round 1 was basically round 4 of their last fight. High pace, with back and forth action on the ground. Nogueira was demonstrating his upgrades, with a noticeably improved boxing game. Margo developed the game plan.
And I saw many fights from Heath Herring, and I knew that when he gets desperate, he would shoot. And he had a decent wrestling, but not that good wrestling. So I said, Nogueira, let's combine the punching with the submission.
He threatened many times with the various submissions. The round ended and he returned to his corner, looking just like he went for a light jog. To his credit, Herring was in great shape as well. He might have been losing, but he wasn't going anywhere. As usual, they got after it right away in the second. Herring punched his way into a double-leg takedown, but Nogueira sprawled.
He unleashed the anaconda again. Nogueira twisted his upper body, going from a front headlock to his back. While still twisting on Heath's arm and neck, he turned beet red and instinctively tried to pull his trapped arm out. It was too late. He tapped.
I remember, I don't remember in the fight. I mean, it's hard to remember every little moment in the fight, but I think I tried to spin out, and when I tried to sit out, that's actually what it made it tighter. If I had kind of stayed based out and not, I tried to kind of sit out and come underneath them, and that's actually what I think I put myself worse into it. Come to find out now.
Final Conflict 2004 was held in the famed Saitama Super Arena on August 15, 2004. The event broke the attendance record with 47,629 fans in the building. The final four was Minotauro, Fedor, Noya Ogawa, and Sergei Karatanov. The semifinal matches were voted on by fans, and Rodrigo drew Karatanov. Sergei Karatanov was a tough sambo expert who competed in mixed martial arts while serving in the Russian military as a paratrooper. He was undefeated in his Pride tenure, going 4-0, all finishes. He didn't disappoint, and didn't back down from the interim champion, but lost a unanimous decision.
Fedor, on the other hand, made quick work of Ogawa, armbarring him in less than a minute. As with their first bout, the heavyweight finals began with the singing of their respective national anthems. The rematch was finally here. Rodrigo was surprised by Fedor's speed in their first bout. This time, it was Minotauro's turn.
Fedor was impressed in the second fight because he imposed a rhythm very strong, and you could see in his eyes. I could see in Fedor's eyes, he was kind of open his eyes in a way, what I'm doing here, what this guy is doing. And he was confused.
The adjustments made by Brazilian top team were immediately evident. Nogueira was markedly faster, defending Fedor's signature ground and pound, and attacking with submissions at a higher pace. With 6 minutes left in the first round, Fedor leapt into Nogueira's guard with a right hook. To defend, Nogueira sat up, and both their heads clashed. Blood poured from Fedor's face. The referee stopped the action so the doctor could examine it. It was a huge cut.
The fight was waved off, declared a no contest. It was a disappointing end to a fantastic event. The rematch was immediately set for Pride's New Year's event, Shockwave. This was for all the marbles, the unified Pride heavyweight title, and the title of Grand Prix champion. The day leading up to the fight was an adventure for Rodrigo.
All the streets closed. We went to the subways, and in subway, tried to go station to station since 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 10 o'clock in the evening. So this thing made me exhausted.
He was going to be late. The biggest show of the year was about to start, beginning with Pride's traditional parade of fighters. They needed to make a quick decision.
So the guy called me from the Fuji TV and said, "What should I do?" I said, "Send my brother."
Rogerio was in the locker room already.
The president of the Pride came inside the room and said, "Please go there inside the ring, show the people, show the TV. Rodrigo's here, no?" And I say, okay, give the cap, no? I put the cap, didn't see my face. So I walk inside the ring. We face each other, me and Fedor, and I feel like I'm going to fight with this guy, no? And I call Rodrigo. I say, "Split the money, man. I'm going to get it."
With no previous match to worry about, both men were fresh for the main event. Rodrigo trained hard with BTT, improving on the original game plan. Faster, lighter. The problem was, it was still the original game plan. Margot Sperry noticed that Fedor made the adjustments.
He was very smart, and he realized our intentions, and our mistake was that we didn't expect that he was going to be prepared for our game plan.
He was notably lighter on his feet, springing with combinations that finished with a hip toss. Fedor didn't follow Nogueira down, he just tossed him. From there he employed stomps for the first time in the Pride ring. Minotauro would either be forced to stand or eat them.
Emelianenko delivered punishing right hands, 4 of which would have flattened lesser men. Not Nogueira. He was still there, but couldn't execute. He simply couldn't catch up. In the end, Fedor was effective throughout the fight, couldn't finish Rodrigo, and won by unanimous decision. Rodrigo won another shot at the champion. Fedor won, but he was never out of the fight. Maybe they could adjust further and finally win. Myra Sperry had to tell him.
From the third fight, I said, "Yeah, that's enough." He got really hurt, and he is the kind of fighter who doesn't never give up. But after that fight, I said, "Listen, man, we cannot fight against this guy anymore. He is too much. He's too much for us. We cannot handle this guy. It is what it is. We had to make a decision. Listen, let's keep moving forward, and let's think about other fighters and try to live with that."
Minotauro returned to the winner's circle, defeating Paulo Nastula and Kiyoshi Tamura. He entered the Pride Openweight Grand Prix in 2006, a throwback to the original event in 2000. There, he defeated Zulucinho and Fabricio Verdum, only to be eliminated by Josh Barnett in a very close, highly exciting matchup. Minotauro's final match with Pride was against Barnett in a rematch. It was a continuation of their first bout. Extremely exciting, showcasing all aspects of high-level MMA. This time, Nogueira did more and secured a unanimous decision victory. Barnett cornered men against Rodrigo, and each man had a win over the other. Josh had a lot of respect for him.
He's a legend for a reason. His never give up attitude. It won him that fight against Bob. It won him that fight against CroCop. One of the things that is so notable about him is just had a granite chin for most of his career. Obviously, it's not something you can keep forever, as we saw later on in his career, but at his peak, you put that kind of durability, that tenacity, and those skills, that talent, and you're going to have a champion-level guy.
In one of the biggest acquisitions in pro sports since the AFL-NFL merger, Zuffa, the parent company of UFC, purchased Pride from Dream Stage Entertainment in March of 2007. A month later, Nogueira was seen sitting cage-side with UFC President Dana White at UFC Fight Night 9. The fans were going crazy. Will we get to see the great Minotauro enter the cage? At UFC 69, Dana White made it official. Minotauro and Nogueira signed with the promotion. With the new promotion came a new team. The Nogueira brothers left Brazilian top team for the newly minted Black House. They focused on the differences between fighting in a ring versus a cage. Rogerio looks back.
In America, they have a best wrestling, In the cage, in the UFC, it's different style, Have to think about the takedown, And in Japan, it's different. So you put the guy put you down, have a chance to make jiu-jitsu because of the ring, And the cage is different.
Rodrigo made his debut against an old rival, Heath Herring, at UFC 79. Although Heath dropped him with a head kick in the first, the fight wasn't stopped, and Nogueira rallied to win by unanimous decision. Heath fought Minotauro 3 times, and framed his career. Each time they fought, it represented a different phase in Rodrigo's evolution and legacy. The first bout was for an inaugural title of a legendary league, which set the bar for the heavyweight division from then on. Their second bout solidified his signature technique. The third paved way for Nogueira's anticipated UFC run. Throughout it all, there was a common thread.
I think it's one of the things I've always really tried. He could just take a beating and always keep his head about him. And I think a lot of people really underestimate that. I think he has great jiu-jitsu, don't get me wrong, but I think he was really able to kind of lull people into this false sense of security and then kind of catch them with stuff. And that's kind of what for me, it was always trying to be, if you could just weather the storm and try to, unload on the guy. I think he was always able to kind of keep his head about him, even when he was getting hurt. He was always trying to stay dangerous. And I think it's hard to fight people like that because you just always have to be sharp. I think a lot of guys, they think, they get this guy and then they try to unload on him, and then if it doesn't happen, they kind of, shot their wad at that point. But Nogueira, I think he would always just kind of wait. He would endure the storm and still be looking for that, looking for the submission or looking for, the finish. I always enjoyed having. I know it sounds bad to say I enjoyed fighting with him. I liked it because it was fun. It always felt like it was competitive. Obviously he wins, but it was always like it was always you knew something was going to happen. It was always an enjoyable time.
Once again, politics played a role in Nogueira's next bout. Randy Couture came out of retirement to defeat Tim Sylvia for the heavyweight belt, only to vacate the title citing pay issues and the UFC's inability to sign Emelianenko. Randy was tied up in legal proceedings, but was still technically the champion. So the UFC set up an interim heavyweight championship bout between Tim and Minotauro. Tim, the Maniac Sylvia, was another giant. 6'8", 261 pounds with big-time knockout power. His coach was former champion Pat Miletich, a fantastic fighter and arguably better coach. His team, Miletich Fighting Systems, featured such names as Matt Hughes, Jens Pulver, and Robbie Lawler. Rodrigo took us inside the preparation.
Yeah, I was prepared to boxing. This guy wasn't easy to put him down, So I trained a lot of Greco too, and it was hard to shoot in his leg. The American guys they're very good in throws, but also I was pretty much prepared to boxing him.
Midway through the first, Sylvia dropped Nogueira with a big right hand. Tim fouled him to the ground to finish, but Minotauro closed his guard and weathered the onslaught. They returned to their feet, and Nogueira was visibly rocked, but managed to make it into round 2. Round 2 was mostly a striking affair. He was having trouble with Tim's right hand, taking a few shots, but firing back with his own. He desperately wanted to take it to the ground, but Tim held him off. Going into the third round, Nogueira was down 2. Scheduled for 5, he had to turn it around. He shot in and pulled guard, before sweeping Tim onto his back.
I watch his fights, and I know always when people, go past his guard, he always put his arm under, you know what I mean? Like he did to going out with me. But so I was ready to him to do this, So I was ready, like, okay, when I go to the side mode, he's going to put his arm inside, and now, I'm going to put him guard and do the guillotine.
He only had a second to lock it in, but like a sniper, he did, tapping Tim out. He was the UFC interim champion, and the first man in history to have held both the Pride and UFC championship belt. It would be Rodrigo's 4th championship in his storied career.
It played out like it always did. A rerun everyone wanted to see. He was down, counted out, but found a way to win, pulling victory from the jaws of defeat. The bull is a stubborn, tough animal. A minotaur, the beast with the body of a man and the head of a bull, couldn't have been a better metaphor. You could never break him. He was never out of a fight, whether it was for his own life or a championship belt. With Randy still dealing with legal matters, Nogueira's first title defense was against Frank Mir. Mir was the resident jiu-jitsu master of the UFC heavyweight division, and while Nogueira was tapping opponents in Japan, fans always fantasized about what would happen should they ever meet. The UFC finally made it happen.
When Rodrigo won the Pride Heavyweight Championship, Frank Mir was making his pro debut. He always admired his game.
I had heard of him because of the other guys that trained with him in the gym were just talking about, hey, there's this big guy who, a Nogueira who can fight with his guard, fight off his back, and he's dangerous. And I remembered I immediately became enamored of that because when I first started training jiu-jitsu, people were telling me already, oh, you're a big guy, so you can't fight from your guard, you won't fight off your back. It all just depends on who gets on top. It was great to have somebody proving that I could sit there and go, well, that guy's 240 pounds and he seems to be able to throw up a triangle just fine without any issues. And, I don't think many people in the heavyweight division want to be in that guy's guard.
Recognizing the star power of the matchup, they first set the men up as opposing coaches in the Ultimate Fighter, or Tough Reality Series. It was a successful formula that allowed UFC to build up hype for a bout, while also building the brand with younger, up-and-coming fighters. This time, Frank and Rodrigo would be coaching lightweight and light heavyweight fighters. Frank told us about his relationship with Rodrigo on the show.
I mean, I was a fan of his. I like him. I think he's a very good leader and a great role model. He has certain characteristics that I don't possess. And so I admire them even more in him because I'm not that guy. If we all have a situation, I can lead on a horizontal playing field, but I'm not the guy that steps up and go, hey, look at me, follow my ways. Let me be the example. I'm more of a loner mentality. That's why I've never done well in team sports. Where Nogueira had that attribute where he had great leadership ability, and he was like a big brother to all his students and all the athletes on the team, where I was more or less one of the other guys. Hey, you can do it your way, but here's the way I do it, and you make your own decision.
Wald Bloise is part of Rodrigo's coaching staff. As a man who earned a black belt under Minotauro, he's very familiar with how passionate he is about teaching the art of jiu-jitsu.
He loves it. He really enjoyed teaching. He's a great personality and a great teacher. When he teaches you to never lose your enthusiasm. If you lose an arm lock, you try omoplata. If you lose a triangle, you keep trying.
This enthusiasm extended to the ring as well.
It doesn't mean, actually, he's the living proof that you should be trying during the fight, because the person is not your opponent is not your team man, your teammate. And it thinks it doesn't work sometimes inside the school. It will work during the fight like he did. He proved it.
Team Nogueira would win both tournaments, Efren Escudero for the lightweights and Ryan Bader for the light heavyweights.
Their fight would take place at UFC 92. As the fight drew near, Nogueira came down with a bad staph infection. With less than a month before his bout, he had to be hospitalized for a week. His bad luck continued when he was released from the hospital. He returned to training and tore the meniscus in his left knee. The hype for the fight was huge, and there was no way he was going to pull out of it. Frank Mir always idolized Minotauro. He showcased jiu-jitsu and heart unlike any other athlete before, especially at heavyweight. Frank figured their ground games would neutralize each other, so he'd finally get to showcase another piece of his toolbox, his striking.
The fact really I had going in my favor is that I knew that up to that point, I had dominated everybody with ground fighting. I really didn't need to do stand-up fighting. But in all reality, I've been doing stand-up since I was 6 years old. I felt very confident that he was underestimating my stand-up, not from a lack of ability on my part, but just I never had much use for it at that moment.
The lack of use wasn't for a lack of skill. It was just easier to tap a guy. With Minotauro, he knew that wasn't going to be the case.
That's probably the only fight I've ever walked into where, because of, it was funny, at first I was like, oh, well, it's one thing to acknowledge that someone's better than you at what you're best at. I was like, well, his jiu-jitsu's, as good as mine, if not better, maybe. I am not for sure head and shoulders above him in jiu-jitsu. So that's why I was like, oh, I'll just do the stand-up. But then I didn't realize until I actually walked in the cage, I actually had a moment of terror, realizing that, holy shit, I'm not able to just fall back on jiu-jitsu, because in every other fight I'd had up to that moment in my life, I knew that, well, if we hit the ground or if I grab you, I can jump guard, I'll have a distinct advantage. And here was the one time I'm looking across going, oh shit, I don't have that advantage right now. And so it actually made me really nervous.
The difference was apparent right away, and it was one of Mir's best striking demonstrations of his career. He used great footwork and distance, and scored multiple times with the left hand, dropping him twice in the first. In the second, he turned up the gas and knocked out Rodrigo with a straight left. It was the first time in 36 fights that he had been finished.
Was the great Minotauro done? Not quite yet. He fought Randy Couture at UFC 102. It was a fight Rodrigo always wanted, going back to his time at Rings.
He was in the same final, in the other side in Japan. And, was one of my idols, Like when I first watched UFC, I watched him when he was the champ, the champ of UFC, when he defeated Peter Belfort. He was a guy I looked for. Was like a true sport guy, respectful, was a sport man, He was a true man, I like the way. So I always look up to him. And then I had a chance to fight this guy. I trained like a crazy, to fight him. But I ended up, I fought like a Valentine Elving when he defeated Randy by the guillotine choke. I was so disappointed, for the day. When Randy lost, looked like I lost it that day too, So I was a big fan of this guy.
It was a special moment for him.
I trained very much. Was my chance to fight my idol. Was in Oregon, his city, his hometown. And I was very motivated to fight against this guy, his hometown. I remember when I came inside of the octagon, people was booing like in Brazil, like people was booing me, I felt the same thing. The American guys come to fight in Brazil.
Rodrigo defeated Randy by unanimous decision. It was a battle of legends, and it lived up to expectations, being named Fight of the Year by Inside Fights.
Years of wars took their toll. He was slated to fight Cain Velasquez at UFC 108, but came down with another staph infection, delaying the bout to UFC 110. He was knocked out again. He was booked for a mere rematch, but he had to pull out for major surgery on both of his hips and his knee. In May of 2011, UFC returned to Rio, and Nogueira returned to the ring and knocked out Brandon Schaub. It was a fight Luis Doria remembers fondly, saying, "Many people used to say he needed to retire. The boy was going to win. He felt it and told me, 'Master, I will knock him out.' And you did it."
At UFC 140, Minotauro faced Mir again. This time, Minotauro matched Mir in the striking department, dropping him with a right hand in the first round.
In that situation, he still caught me with a great shot. I tried to grab him and I just collapsed down. And as I have one leg, I'm trying to position over, but my body's not quite turned on just yet. I'm a little bit out of it. And then when I got stuck in the guillotine, I remember almost kind of laughing for a second inside. When you sit there, just a bad situation so bad, you're like, well, it can't get any worse. So I'm sitting there going, so I've been rocked, and now I'm in his best submission. I don't even think we're a minute into this thing. So I was like, all right. And I just shut my brain off, honestly, and just started working. It became just rolling all over again. In fact, a lot of it I don't remember.
Mir found himself on top, locking into Kimura.
I just knew that at that moment, I'm like, shit, he's not going to tap. And that was just an instant sensation that I had. So I knew that I had to put enough pressure to where the referee would jump in and get involved. I knew that if I kept twisting, they're not going to let me completely destroy his arm. The referee will jump in. It was Herb, and stop the fight. Kind of like a TKO type situation. I have a guy who's not going to quit, but I'll just keep hitting him until the referee comes in. And so when I started applying pressure, that's why you see me actually look up and look at Herb. I'm just waiting because I'm not even really waiting for Nogueira to tap. In my mind, I knew that was never going to happen. So I'm just trying to look at Herb so that way as soon as he says done, I'm going to let go. I've never been a fan of people that hold on to things. I think that's cheap and that's dirty. And it has no place in our sport. So as soon as the referee jumps on me, I let go. But then as I'm looking up at him, the arm let loose and it obviously snapped. And it actually disturbed me to break his arm. It actually, if you watch the fight again, you can see as I'm doing the interview, I kind of look over my shoulder because I'm looking at him on the ground. And once again, it's because of somebody I've admired and somebody that looked up to and studied, and how certain moves I do are because of him. That was a weird place to be. I think it was almost akin to like beating up your big brother. We were like, wow, that's just not. There really was no if I had probably done that to somebody else, I probably would have felt more satisfaction in the victory. But because it was Nogueira, it wasn't as satisfying as I think some people think it is.
Frank Mir became the first man to knock out Nogueira and submit him. This was the beginning of the end. A man known for never being finished, having infinite heart and will, was being finished. He went on to submit Dave Herman in front of his home fans at UFC 153, but was defeated 3 more times.
After his unanimous decision loss to Stefan Struve at UFC 190, Dana White declared he would no longer offer Minotauro fights. It was just like being caught in Mir's Kimura. There was no way Nogueira was going to tap. You had to literally break him. Dana White wouldn't allow a legend to break in the cage, and ended his career. A man with that much heart needs to be saved from himself.
Trained good in the training, but I couldn't perform the same, you know. And all my things I have, I broke my arms, you know, twice. We broke me with Fabrice Verdun, I broke my arm again. And big injuries come up, you know. And lost my flexibility, things like these. And when I end my last fight, you know, Dana calls me and say, man, I help the off-season in Brazil for some works, like political works. I'm very good on the political side. There was a timing to stop, you know, for me. Like, I stopped focusing on the UFC, you know.
He was offered a position with the company and retired. He became a UFC ambassador in Brazil, and on July 10, 2016, he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. He's become quite the entrepreneur, opening gyms and restaurants. He has a program on UFC Fight Pass called The Third Degree, where he travels the world learning different martial arts. When looking at Rodrigo's career, it's easy to see that his achievements stand on their own. He held the title for the 2 biggest mixed martial arts organizations of all time. The early 2000s are considered by many as the height of the heavyweight division in mixed martial arts, and Minotauro was king.
But you have to look deeper. He revolutionized jiu-jitsu with an indomitable spirit. His comebacks, and there were many, are the stuff of legend. Rodrigo already left a legacy, Luis Doria said. He is a great champion admired by all for his humility, strength, and heart. He engaged in great fights, always respecting his opponents. He provided us a lot of happiness. He is a reference for all of us. He is a great example inside and outside of the octagon. I consider him my son. I love him a lot. His legacy was built on heart. He accomplished his greatest feat as a boy. He shouldn't have lived, let alone walk, only to go on to have one of the most legendary careers in mixed martial arts. He lived his life as mythical as his namesake, Minotauro.
Like what you just heard? Check us out on Twitter and Instagram at MMATrueFan. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube. Please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Special thanks to Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, Luis Doria, Bill Goldberg, Mario Sperry, Ricardo Liborio, Frank Mir, Heath Herring, Wald Bloise, and Josh Barnett. Translation by Viviani Sikorsky. Music by With Lions Productions. Artwork by Mike Stamp.